Okay, so you've probably noticed that OpenAI has been dropping new models like crazy lately, right? One after another. And you might be wondering, is this actual progress? Or are they just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks? Well, I've been tracking every single release, every benchmark, all the drama behind the scenes, and what I found is, well, it's surprising.
This isn't confidence. This is straight up panic. And you know what's weird? That panic might be the best thing that's ever happened to you as an AI user. In this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll look at what on earth happened when OpenAI dropped GPT 5.3 only to replace it just 48 hours later. We'll dive into why their competitors scare them into it. And most importantly, what all of this chaos means for the next big thing, GPT-6. All right, let's start with that absolutely wild 48 hours.
Right, let's set the scene. Imagine this 48-hour blitz that just came out of nowhere. On March 3, 2026, OpenAI pushes out GPT 5.3 Instant. And it's a real update, you know? It's faster, it's got fewer hallucinations, people are genuinely impressed. And then, bam! Just 2 days later, they drop GPT 5.4. It makes the model they just released totally obsolete, overnight. I mean, that's not a product roadmap, that's a full-on fire drill.
And really, the timeline here just says it all. I mean, look at this contrast. To get from GPT-4 to GPT-5, it took them over 2 years. 2 years of development. And the gap between 5.3 and 5.4, 48 hours. Yeah, this single picture tells you everything you need to know about the insane pressure OpenAI is feeling right now.
So what actually happened behind the scenes? Well, OpenAI had 2 different tracks going. They had their main general model, and then they had this separate, super specialized coding model. GPT 5.4 was the moment they just slammed those 2 tracks together into one. The logic makes sense, right? Enterprise clients don't want to pick between a great coder and a great general assistant. They want one single tool that does it all. So OpenAI forced the merge. But that still doesn't explain the crazy speed. That was all about the competition.
So what was the real driver here? I mean, what lit the fire under them? It was the competition, plain and simple. In early February of 2026, Anthropic released Claude 4.6, and, well, for OpenAI, something really uncomfortable happened. By pretty much every benchmark that matters, Claude suddenly became the smartest model in the room.
And this chart, wow, this really illustrates the problem perfectly. Just look at these coding benchmark scores. You've got Gemini and Claude both hitting around 80%. And OpenAI, they were lagging way behind at just 49.1%. For the first time in 3 years, OpenAI wasn't the technical leader anymore, and you could absolutely feel it. People weren't just saying, oh, Claude is almost as good. No, they were saying it actually felt smarter. And hey, it wasn't just coding either. On this other key benchmark that measures how well AI agents can do actual professional work, Claude 4.6 just pulled ahead by a massive 144 ELO points. Look, you can't stop that kind of momentum with a fancy press release. You have to ship a better product, and you have to do it fast.
So OpenAI shipped. They had to, but their real secret weapon wasn't just about playing catch-up on the old benchmarks. Nope, it was about introducing a completely new capability, something that changed the game.
They're calling it computer use, and honestly, this is the part that really matters for your day-to-day workflow. GPT 5.4 isn't just a smarter chatbot anymore. It can now actually control your computer. We're talking navigating a real desktop environment, using screenshots and simulated mouse and keyboard commands to get stuff done. And the results here are, well, they're staggering. On this particular test, GPT 5.4 scored a 75%. That is above the human baseline of 72.4%. I mean, just for some context, the model right before this one, it scored just 47.3%. That is a gigantic leap in practical, real-world capability.
Just think for a second about what this actually means. You're not just typing a question and getting an answer anymore. Now you're describing a goal. Something like, hey, review this spreadsheet and send a summary to the team. And the model, it just does it. It executes all the steps, opens the apps, does the work, all without you touching a thing. OpenAI is basically calling it your own personal junior analyst.
Now, here's the crucial point. For a feature like that to actually work, you need it to be reliable, right? So GPT 5.4 also introduced something they call extreme reasoning mode. It basically just throws a ton more computing power at verifying everything. And the result? Individual factual claims are now 33% less likely to be wrong. That is the kind of nuts and bolts improvement that really matters when you're letting an AI do work for you. Okay, so this big push for brand new capabilities, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It had some pretty serious political consequences. And you've got to hear what this technology got OpenAI mixed up in, especially with this really controversial deal involving the Pentagon. So here's the backstory. In late February 2026, the U.S. Department of War just ends its relationship with Anthropic. And why? Well, Anthropic CEO flat out refused a direct request to remove the safety guardrails that were stopping its AI from being used for things like autonomous weapon systems. The government's response was swift and brutal. They labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk. And just like that, there was this big vacuum, a vacuum that OpenAI was more than happy to step into. So OpenAI signs this deal to put its models into classified Pentagon networks. Sam Altman's argument was, it's better to have a seat at the table so we can enforce some red lines. But critics, they immediately zeroed in on this one little clause buried deep in the contract: any lawful use. And they argued that the word lawful is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, especially when it's the government that gets to define what the law is. The backlash was insane. Cancel ChatGPT was trending on social media within just a few hours.
Now, this Pentagon deal, it matters for one huge reason that goes way beyond the politics. The money from that deal is helping to fund something called Project Stargate. And Stargate is the massive machine that is, right now, actively building GPT-6. You see how the geopolitical and the technical are just completely tangled up here?
Let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale of this for a second. We're talking about a $500 billion infrastructure project. That's $500 billion. To build what is, by far, the largest computing infrastructure in all of human history.
And the power, my goodness, the power requirements. Just one of these facilities, the one in Michigan, draws 1.4 gigawatts of power. To put that in perspective, that's about 25% of the entire energy generation capacity for that whole region. A single data center eating up a quarter of the power grid, it's just mind-boggling.
So what exactly is Stargate? Well, it's a massive joint project between some of the biggest names in tech. Think SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, Microsoft. And what it represents is this gigantic bet that to get to the next level of AI, the level that will give us GPT-6, you need infrastructure that has just never existed on this planet before. And here's the key part. This isn't some far-off plan. It's already up and running, and it's actively training the systems of the future as we speak.
So the big question is, what is all of this insane infrastructure actually going to produce? Let's talk about what's coming with GPT-6, which is expected sometime in the second half of 2026. Because if OpenAI actually delivers on what they've been hinting at, it's going to be a fundamentally different kind of tool than what we have today. The single biggest change here isn't even just about raw intelligence. It's about memory. Right now, every single conversation you have with an AI is stateless. It starts fresh every time. It has no idea what you told it last week. But GPT-6? It's being designed from the ground up for persistent, user-controlled recall. We're talking across weeks and even months. It's going to remember your preferences, your projects, everything.
Now, just imagine this. Take that persistent memory we just talked about and layer it on top of that computer use capability. What you get is something genuinely new. You get an agent that doesn't just know how to use your computer, but one that knows you specifically. Then you add in the teased self-updating capabilities, the idea that the model can learn and improve overnight without a full, massive retraining, and well, you are getting much, much closer to a truly autonomous agent.
So after all that, what's the final verdict? Well, OpenAI is absolutely 100% in panic mode. But here's the thing. The output of all that panic is real, tangible gains for you right now. Computer use is legitimately a game changer. The reliability improvements are actually meaningful. And all this fierce competition is forcing a pace of innovation that directly benefits us, the users. So yeah, it's panic, but I'd call it productive panic. And all of this, it brings us to the really crucial question, doesn't it? Because GPT-6 isn't just going to be a smarter assistant, it's going to be a persistent system, embedded right into your computer, constantly learning from your behavior. And that leaves us all to wonder, as AI becomes this ever-present agent in our lives, is all this incredible new power really worth